Meeting come to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wendy Morgan Adams. I am the 3rd Ward Alderman. I direct your attention, there's a typo on the committee agenda that says I'm 4th Ward, but I'm actually the 3rd Ward Alderman. We wouldn't want Patrick Ludwigson to get nervous about this, so just want to correct that. And I want to welcome you here tonight to our Prairie Town Hall meeting. Tonight our panel is made up of the Prospect Heights National Resource Commission board members, Agnes Wojnarski, the Prospect Heights National Resource Commission chairperson and commissioners, John Kimmich, Ed Madden, Seth Marcus, Jill Moskal, and Dana Severson. The National Resource Commission has also reached out to their esteemed colleagues, Chris Anker, the senior wildlife biologist for the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, and one of the world's foremost authorities on coyotes. John McCabe, the director of the Department of Resource Management for the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, and Isabella Rydlinski, a conservation ecologist from the Field Museum. Isabella has been a consultant of the ComEd Prairie Project since its beginning in 2014 and conducted the original quadrant sampling. Tonight's meeting will go for 1 hour and will end promptly at 7, as the National Resource Commission has their regularly scheduled board meeting immediately following this town hall meeting. You're invited to stay if you'd like for the actual scheduled board meeting as well. We will begin with a brief statement by the commission, followed by a short video, and then open up the conversation for questions and answers.
Thank you, Wendy. My name is Dana Severson. I'm one of the commissioners. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's really great to see a nice turnout. I'd like to thank, as Wendy said, our esteemed colleagues down at the other end, John and Chris. They really are the experts. Isabel is running a little bit late. She'll be here shortly. And John Kamish is on the way back from Mississippi, dropping his kids at school. So what I'd like to say just right off the bat, we had a PowerPoint presentation that we're not going to do in the interest of time and getting you the ability to ask questions and get answers. But we do have a short video that we want to show you. The video is a sort of a rework of a video that we did in 2016 where we went through the progress of the prairie and explained some principles of land management and what was going on there with weed succession and a couple of other things. And then now it has some areas of interest from where we are now 5 years later. So that's what's in the video. With that, I'd say let's go ahead, John, Patrick, and run the video.
Illinois is called the Prairie State because for thousands of years, vast expanses of Native American prairie covered our state. With settlement, development, and agricultural use, most of that habitat has been wiped out. Right now, only 0.1% of prairie remains in the state of Illinois. The benefits of a restored prairie are great. Improved water quality and flood control, because of the extensive root systems that prairie plants has, which filter, absorb, and hold stormwater on site, eliminating or at least reducing flooding. Prairies also can increase your property value. Studies show that an estimate about 5% increase in property value of your home if you have a prairie close by. A study from 1993 by the Illinois State Water Survey estimated the value of open space for floodplain storage, including wastewater reclamation and aquifer recharge, as more than $52,000 per acre in the Chicago region, or for our size prairie, about $234,000, not to mention the incredible value to wildlife, habitat, and biodiversity. Prairies enhance the recreation and the natural experience for residents in Prospect Heights. And lastly, it does reduce maintenance costs for ComEd. In any type of ecological restoration, you need to understand the land use history of the site. So this area was an agricultural use, this 4.5 acres was an agricultural use for decades, followed by ComEd right-of-way use. On December 7th, 30 volunteers gathered to put down 80 pounds of seed over the 4.5 acres. Now, why was it so important to understand what we had beforehand? The reason is that along with that 80 pounds of seed that we put down, years and years and decades of seed from these weeds and Eurasian grasses would have accumulated in the soil. So we needed to know that not only our prairie seedlings were going to come up, but also the weeds of what was here before the restoration. What we very quickly discovered was that there was different conditions throughout these 4.5 acres that affected the results. For instance, I am standing here in a half an acre that we lovingly call Marcia's Prairie. In this area, the site was mowed every week or two for the last 30 years. As a result, there was no accumulation of clover seed in this area. Because this area was mowed on a weekly basis, it prevented the accumulation of years and years of clover seed. So when the prairie seedlings came up in this area, they didn't have to compete with clover as much as the prairie seedlings in the other areas. So effectively, this area is further along in its restoration. It's basically reaching the finish line faster. Although mowing is employed in ecological restoration, it's the timing of the mowing and why you're mowing that makes the difference. So in the very first year, we did mow this prairie because our seedlings were this tall, expending all of their energy into developing their root systems. And the weeds that came up were much taller than the seedlings. We wanted to set back those weeds to allow the seedlings to be able to come up. So we mowed very high in that first year for that reason. Other types of mowing are not encouraged in prairie restoration, and for instance, mowing down really low encourages certain types of plant species. Right here you have common plantain, narrowleaf plantain, dandelions, and creeping Charlie tends to tolerate mowing as well. Meanwhile, native prairie plants, when they're in that first year seedling stage, they will tolerate mowing because the mower is going above them. However, when they're already in their second year, you wouldn't want to mow them down because they need that green leafy tissue to photosynthesize. So then you're favoring a community of plants like the plantain that tolerates mowing. You're not favoring prairie plants like you have here in the area, in the section that wasn't mowed. So here we see Monarda, Elamis canadensis, Canada wild rye, rattlesnake master, Eryngium yuccifolium, more Monarda fistulosa. One setback early on in the restoration was an unanticipated flush of clover. This happened because of common mowing practices, which let the seed of the clover accumulate for years and years and years. In the summer of 2015, when we realized that the clover was outcompeting our seedlings, I reached out to my colleagues at the Morton Arboretum for advice. It was advised to me to use a selective herbicide called Transline that effectively removes legumes, so plants in the pea family, and some other species of plants, but it doesn't eliminate everything. So grasses would survive, and other species of the prairie plants that we seeded would survive. So in the summer of 2015, we applied Transline to the entire section past Sherwood Avenue, and then this middle section over here down to Elmhurst Road. We left the sides of clover as an experimental test patch. In December of 2015, we also had seed generously donated to us from Fermilab Natural Areas. The prairie seed mix that they gave us was combined with 40 pounds of seed that our volunteers collected and was reseeded over 2 acres of the site. It is important to understand that prairie restoration takes time. What you see here today is in no way near what the prairie will look like in 2 to 3 years. The reason for this is that as the prairie matures, it undergoes ecological succession. Succession is the observed change in a species structure of an ecological community over time. To better understand plant succession, let's take a look at one of the PHNRC test sites. This is an example of a first-year seeding. So what you have here is scattered weeds and many seedlings of things like pale purple coneflower, we have brown-eyed Susan, little blue stem, and various other species of plants. This area, from about here until here, is an example of a second-year seeding. So we see prairie plants that are coming out. We also see the annual weeds. Most of the conservative prairie species are still missing in the second year. From about here until back there is an example of the third year in succession. And so some of the black-eyed Susans have become aggressive, but they are short-lived perennials and will eventually go away. We see pockets, though, of other species that have been segregating themselves and coming forward. This section over here is in its 4th year of plant succession. You can see that the area is very biodiverse. It has a lot of different species of native prairie plants, and they are competing well with each other. Nobody's taking over too much, giving each other space, and there's not really any weedy species of plants here at all. Anytime you start with an agricultural field and try to turn it back to prairie, you need to understand what to expect. In the first year, pioneer species of plants come in, such as lamb's quarters that you see here, knotweeds, nutsedges, and velvet leaf. These are all typical annual weeds. In the first 2 years, these annual weeds dominate a prairie restoration while the prairie seedlings are gaining strength and developing root systems. In the 3rd to 5th year, as they strengthen and mature, the perennial prairie plants that were seeded here will be visibly outcompeting the weeds. As ecological plant succession continues, the mature prairie plants become the prairie matrix and the weeds go away. Having these pioneer weeds here is actually very important. They are placeholders while the prairie plants come in. Anytime you have bare soil, something will come in. We want these weeds to be here instead of something much worse, like invasive plants such as teasel and Canada thistle. We employ various management techniques to encourage the process of succession, in other words, so the prairie can get to the finish line faster. There are many management techniques that we use as we actively manage this prairie, such as spot application of herbicide to invasive plants or large patches of non-native grasses, pulling, brush cutting, and planting plugs of native plants. Our methods are always consistent with best management practices and the techniques of integrated pest management. We rely heavily on scientific literature and proven management techniques. We also have the support of numerous ecologists and biologists within the conservation community, namely the Morton Arboretum, Fermilab Natural Areas, and the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. We have direct communication with ComEd at all times and update the senior environmental specialists on a regular basis. It is important to note that the principles of restoration and natural areas management are completely different than gardening or landscaping. With natural areas management, it is important to employ management techniques using the right resources at the right time. Invasive plants have their own timetables for management, but in all cases, you want to limit their spread. As these natural areas mature, as plant competition and ecological succession favors native species, and as invasives are actively controlled, the end result will be beautiful, sustainable, biodiverse wildlife corridors that bring the residents of Prospect Heights closer to nature. Fast forward 3 years to 2019, and today you will see a robust prairie in its 5th year of restoration, comprised of over 90 species of Native American plants. The prairie features a walking path that permits public access into the very heart of the site and allows residents to completely immerse themselves in nature. Anyone can view firsthand the abundance of pollinators, caterpillars, and birds, and their unique interdependence with the plants. By now, many know about the plight of the monarchs. Our prairie has thousands of milkweed stems, and the results are staggering. Dozens of monarch butterflies are seen with each survey. As monarch butterfly caterpillars can only feed on milkweed, we are already seeing some of the other thousands of moth, butterfly, and insect species that are dependent on their particular plant that they have evolved with.
Okay. So there's just one thing I'd like to add to that, and that is that prairies have lots of functions. And here in Prospect Heights, there's Isabel out there. If you want to come up over on this side. In Prospect Heights, it takes on some special interest because it's embedded in a residential community. It gives us the opportunity, as not only as people doing restoration work, but as educators, it affords us a very unique opportunity to go to the prairie with kids and have them experience that firsthand. We just completed a summer camp for the Park District, 3 half days, and it was just an absolutely splendid experience. We're embedded with the Betsy Ross Elementary School, 4th grade. We have a year-long prairie project with them. We work with the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, kids, Prospect Heights Kids Care. So there's a very important educational function that happens with not only the prairie, but with all of the sites that we restore. So that said, let's open it up for questions. And anybody, if you have a question or a comment, I'd like you to come up to the podium, state your name, and then you can ask anybody on the panel questions, and we'll go from there.
My name is Carl Humbert. I'm one of the volunteers for the Prospect Heights. And I know one of the issues that has come up, not just here, but also in other areas, is our coyotes. Always a major concern. Did a little bit of research last night, and if you're in California, coyotes can be a bit of a problem, apparently. And the part of it is being Californian, because apparently a lot of these folks tend to feed coyotes, so they bring the coyotes into their areas, near their homes, and then they let their little 3- and 2-year-old children in the backyard, and that's primary prey for mid-sized predators like that. The research that I did, I know we have experts here, is that there has never been a coyote attack in metropolitan Chicagoland. And I'm sure that can be verified. But I think that's an important thing, because people are not so much afraid of small animals, the white-footed mice and things like that, but the idea of a coyote, a dog-sized creature, I think creates a certain amount of concern. And so I was very curious as to what that would be. And really, we have no concerns here. They're very good predators for a lot of the vermin and so on that could be a problem. And I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. And I'd like to have our experts, perhaps, zero in on that and explain exactly what the coyote threat is. And again, a little bit of research that I did indicates there is no coyote threat for the greater metropolitan area. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, do you have something to add to that?
So the point that you made about food being the most important factor in documented coyote attacks, in North America, all attacks have occurred on, with one exception, which occurred in Nova Scotia, an adult woman. But all of their attacks have occurred on children 6 and under, and they were all involving the active feeding of coyotes. In every single case, the attack was not an aggressive attack and then our mauling and then the coyotes left the person alone. It was an attack and an attempt to consume the child. And the only time that happens is when people are actively feeding coyotes. So in the vast majority of the peer-reviewed literature, what you'll see is that a warning telling people to be very careful about either overtly or covertly feeding coyotes. The only instance that I'm aware of in the last 40 years in northeastern Illinois of a coyote coming in contact with a person that we can actually document was a gentleman up in Glenview who was hand-feeding coyotes, and one day he decided he wanted to touch the coyote, so he positioned himself behind a tree, and with his left hand he fed the coyote, with his right hand he touched the coyote, and then the coyote touched him. So I would agree with the research that you've dug up, and that would be consistent with everything that I'm aware of.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to, my understanding is, and perhaps if you could fill us in on this, that coyotes are no more likely to be in a prairie than they are to be in a urban area or a suburban area. In other words, the prairie doesn't attract the coyote.
That's correct. The coyotes in the Chicagoland area are generalists, which means that they're found in all habitats. Everyone in this room resides in the home range of a coyote family group. It doesn't matter if you live in the Loop or any neighborhood in the city of Chicago. The entire landscape is covered with home ranges of coyotes, the vast majority of which are totally not seen by the public. So the fact that the comment area is rough grass, or the comment area would be prairie, would have no effect at all on the number of coyotes in the area.
If I could add too, I would like people to know that the coyotes are around all the time. And I live on Elmhurst Road, right where McDonald Creek comes through. And it's harder to see them during the summer months, but in the early spring or mating season, when they're caring for their young, they're more likely to be seen. But where I really see them is in the winter when we have snow. And what I think are the coyotes only coming through every couple nights or so, I learned quickly that they're coming through several times a day, every day. They follow the creek as a trail of sorts. And it's just a reality that they're here. What's encouraging to know is that the prairie is not increasing the likelihood of us seeing them. And to the contrary, I believe they prefer more open areas, if that's correct, right? In terms of covering ground?
So in a perfect world, yes, that's what we thought. But what we have found is that they're such generalists, they're everywhere. Like I said, even if you were to go down to the museum campus downtown, we're at Navy Pier, and there's a family group of coyotes that live right at Navy Pier. So I would argue that there's very little
Prairie.
what we would call natural habitat there, and they do just fine. To put where we started out, I wanted to mention that as far as attacks go, typically in North America, there's about 3 million dog attacks a year. In the last decade and a half, we've averaged 1 coyote attack a year, and that's due to feeding. So you're far more likely to be attacked by your neighbor's dog or your own dog than you are of a coyote. A coyote attack is much like a shark attack or a bear attack or a mountain lion attack in that it garners a lot of press, but it's far more common that your dog is going to be a problem as opposed to a coyote.
Chris, and I know Agnes has some input on this too. Early on, there were questions from residents about the idea that the prairie was attracting more mice, that there were more mice there and their homes were being invaded by mice and the coyotes were there to eat the mice. And I know Agnes has some information about the difference between a house mouse and a prairie mouse. And maybe you tell that first, but then Chris or John, either one, any kind of input you have about the food source for those coyotes as well.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Coyotes are completely opportunists, so whatever's available is what they'll eat. So at this time of year, they're as likely to come into your yard and take your tomatoes and your apples falling from your tree as they are to take roadkill off the road in the middle of the night or mice as they happen upon them. They're, if you look at the Chicago Urban Coyote website, you Google that, we've been involved in a coyote study here in northeastern Illinois since 2000. We've handled over 1,300 coyotes, tagging them and releasing them to follow what they do. And it's become obvious that there is very little that a coyote will not eat. I think it would be easier at this point to list the things they won't eat as opposed to things that they will eat. So food is not a limiting factor for coyotes. They can survive on just about anything that's out there.
Yeah, you have something you want to add to that? Okay. Maybe you guys can also address this issue. I mean, you guys use herbicide just like we do, and in the case where we use herbicide and any time, it's very judiciously, and it's usually based on plants where there's just no other good way to get rid of them, and those are usually plants that are rhizomatous because you can't dig them all completely up. One of the residents at the Prairie is a beekeeper, and he was concerned that the spot application of herbicide on teasel, or not teasel, Canada thistle, was killing his bees. We talked to him about that, but anything you guys have to add to that would be, I think, beneficial for people to understand.
Hi, so my name is Iza Radlinsky. I'm an ecologist, and I have a extensive background in restoration where in the beginning of my career for over 5 years, I worked in the field with a backpack sprayer on my back. So I can reassure you that spot treatment, like Dana said, is the most judicial use of herbicide. We usually use small amounts that are diluted with water. and no one sprays in a quality habitat when there's wind. And wind is the only way that the bee colony could be affected, when when the wind can carry some of the droplets of the herbicide over. So when we do hear about the bee colony collapse on the news, it's mostly from agricultural sources that spray in a boom on a really large area that has no vegetation cover. I have a little helper here today. And when the spot spraying happens, well, she really wants me to keep quiet. When the spot spraying happens, it happens usually in vegetation, and it's not affected by the wind. And for self-protection, people would not be spraying in high wind conditions as well.
I think also you can add to that the fact that we spray, when we do that, we're spraying herbicides, not insecticides. And herbicides are designed to work on the leafy tissues of plants, not on insects. And so there's a difference there. So we're not spraying insecticide.
Yeah, that's correct. The herbicide will affect plants only, and insecticide will affect insects. Herbicides don't have a direct effect on insect populations.
It's more likely that, first of all, I work with a guy who's a beekeeper for River Trails, and I talked to him about this extensively, and he said that more than likely it's a mite condition that was probably killing his bees if indeed they were dying. We didn't go look, we didn't talk to him, we had no conversation with the guy whatsoever. But it was his opinion that it was probably a mite condition in his hive that was causing it and not related at all. He said if there was any chance of insecticide contamination, it was probably from his neighbors or could be him spraying insecticide on his garden, doing grub treatment, things that use nicotinoids that are known to be toxic on bees. So without talking to the guy and doing extensive research on his hive, and we've offered that service, the beekeeper said he would come out and take a look at it. It's impossible to really have a strong opinion about what was doing that. Any other questions? Anything from you guys?
I'll ask.
Okay.
Clean grounds. I live in Country Gardens, 1 block from the Prairie. I walk it every day. I'm both a friend and a foe of your commission. I thought the meeting was supposed to be on the status of the restoration. I haven't heard anything about status. One of my concerns, because I now walk with mace every day while I take the bike path, because everything is so high. If I want to walk into the mowed area, you literally can't see me. I mean, I'm 5'4", and I can wave and you won't see me. What is your plan, since you're talking about succession, but you're not naming plants, on replacing what seems to be dominant species right now? There's a lot of Monarda/bee balm, that sort of thing. I know I was involved in the initial planting where there were some plugs put in. Indigo never came up, that sort of thing. I saw one liatris, you showed, I think, your prairie by the slough versus the ComEd site. I have never seen that orange Asclepias. I see the moisture one, but that's it, the real tall one with the seed heads of that. So what's the plans and who's going to be doing it? Are you looking for volunteers? Are you looking for city staff to do maintenance? Are you looking for park districts, since this is a leased area by the Prospect Heights Park District, which hasn't contributed in a couple of years monetarily? They might let you use land, but they're not giving you cash. And I don't really see, since I'm there every day, I really don't see people doing anything. I'll see piles every once in a while, and I know one homeowner complained about the tallness, and the prairie cordgrass was planted, and I don't see, well, Sporoborus, whatever, I don't see that in existence at all. So it's like, what's been your failures? What's been your successes with plants, what's your future aims and ambition? Because I see on the journal that I think 30,000 plugs are at the slough, but I don't see any major plantings going on at, the Prairie. And are you moving forward? Because I know when you first applied for the grant, it was supposed to be like every year, oh, you're going to advance 5 more acres, 5 more acres. And I'll be honest with you, thank God it hasn't advanced anywhere, because at parts it's attractive and at other times it's really not. So there you go.
Okay. There's a lot there. Yeah, all right. Thank you, Colleen. First of all, there is a plan in place. The height of the plants, for me personally, I don't think that's really an issue, but that's me personally. There are areas there that are under further restoration. You can see that there's patches in both the east side and the west side that we've taken out that we plan on reseeding this fall. So there are areas that we're addressing to get more biodiversity in there. But part of the reason that things are so tall there is the fact that they're all competing against each other, and it is fully wide open sun. Is anybody going to hack those down? No. Will we start to manage, for instance, the goldenrod, the Canada goldenrod? Those things will be taken out eventually. Again, because we manage so many different sites, we only have X amount of time, and so with a limited volunteer base, we try to spend that time as judiciously as possible.
But we do have interns that work there regularly, and so they've spent probably a total of 2 weeks out of the summer out there. So they're there usually in the mornings, because in the afternoons it's hot, so they work at the slough. In the mornings they work at the Prairie, and they do a lot of brush cutting. They've done spot application of herbicide to invasives, and actually both the city and the park district have contributed financially, both with the interns and with supplies, and continue to do so each year. So we've been able to, and then we have volunteer, we collect seed, we continue to collect seed every year. So this year we'll be collecting some more seed to put down in those patches. There were certain patches that were just, full of Canada thistle or full of teasel that.
Or clover. As far as plugging the prairie, it's sort of an impossible task. And what we've done with the plugging that we did it close to the road when we first started, because we wanted a quick turnaround in terms of appeal to residents. But when we go forward in areas where we've just taken out all this Canada thistle, we've taken out patches of clover, in addition to seeding, we're going to plug into those areas as well.
We are. We have done some plugging. Was it last year? 2 years ago, we probably put down like 1,000 plugs. But unfortunately, just about 2 weeks later, it all got mowed down by someone. So it was sort of unfortunate, because it takes a lot of time and energy and to get those plants grown in a greenhouse and then planted. So sometimes we avoid plugging into areas where we can't keep an eye on it so well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the majority of the plugs now go to creating the riparian buffers around the slough. In that sort of vast expanse that is the prairie, seeding is probably the best option. But to try to get those areas that we've just taken out over the summer, we will put plugs in there as well, and that's always been part of the plan. So, does that help at all? I mean, any further questions?
I'm just interested as far as the status, as far as what your plans are, as far as, as one plant becomes aggressive, are you going to physically dig it out? Are you going to, herbicide it, put it somewhere else? Because there's...
Yeah, I mean, whatever the best way to manage that specific plant, we know what they are. That's exactly what we'll do.
One thing that we're doing is we're doing active scientific counting of the plants that are in the area. So we've done where we go out and we actually log, we put out a PVC piping that's a big square, and we drop it in an area, and we count the species in that area, and then we document it. It's all written down. Not only the type of species, but the number of plants, what % they take up of the quadrant. We have, in the area that we're talking about, we have 30 quadrants that we've marked, and they're documented by GPS. So we do the exact same spot, 30 different spots throughout the area. So we can monitor what it was like in year 1, what it was like in year 3, what it's like in year 5. So we are very actively, scientifically monitoring what plants are there and trying to improve on making it more biodiverse.
And
So I can-
Isabel was actually,
Yeah.
she was the one who did the original quadrant sampling and was
each
just.
one afterward.
And each one afterwards, so.
So we,
She's the
in
expert.
2014, we came out before any action was taken to take baseline data, meaning data in the beginning of a project, so we would have an ability to compare what is there now and what was there before. And then we came back 3 years ago in 2016, also did a quadrant data where we have transects. And we, just like it was said, we drop a 1 meter square transect and write down every species we see there and the cover they have. So if you happen to have that one very nice plant, but it's only one, and it happens to be in your quadrant, we're noting for that too. And then this year I had the opportunity to do that about a month ago. Again, we went out with the interns and some community members, and I was just so pleasantly surprised. There is a great biodiversity there. The amount of insects we saw, and I have to say I'm an ecologist with a plant bias, so I don't know my insects very well. But you can see the variety of things. It was incredible. We saw tons of butterflies, bees, dragonflies, you name it. And it was just super encouraging. And I want to say that you saw on the agenda, I do work for the Field Museum, and we have some research. I'm going to do a little plug in there. But we recently, over the last few years, engaged in research on the monarch butterfly to answer the questions of, we know that cities need nature. We need them for cooling the urban heat island effect. We need them for absorbing flooding during big storm events. We need it for mental and physical well-being. But there's a question whether nature needs cities. And the short answer is yes. We use the monarch butterfly as our study organism to see if the populations could be maintained with more habitat grown in urban and suburban areas. And in order to sustain the monarch population at what it is now, and it has decreased at least 80%, we need additional 1.8 billion with the bee stems of milkweed. And we found by doing projects such as this and converting small parts of our yards to prairie patches, we can provide over 30% of that number in urban areas alone. So I want to congratulate the city of Prospect Heights for doing their part. And you guys are incredible. This is just so uplifting. As you can see, I have little kids. So this gives me hope. So thank you.
I've also, I brought some count sheets. I've recently done butterfly counts in the site, and it's great, it's wonderful. I mean, it's just pretty for one thing, but there is a good diversity of butterflies. I have the count sheets if anyone wants to see the count sheets I just did of the site, but it's really encouraging that there's a good diversity of butterflies, which not only, by the way, are pretty, but they're pollinators, and the pollination, is essential. And one of the things that was mentioned in this video is that, there's less than 1/10 of 1% of the prairie that used to be around. So what that means also is that there's less plants for the pollinators to pollinate, which leads to the food, which leads to things like sequestration of carbon. If you don't have the plants, you don't have that. We not only get food from the plants, we get fibers and oils from the plants. It's said that 1 in every 3 bites of food we take are made possible by pollinators. And without the pollinators, without the plants, you can't have the pollinators. Without the pollinators, you can't have the plants, and it affects our food supply and various other things. So this, it really is true that we're really bringing back pollinators, including very pretty butterflies, right to that site.
Seth, would you be able to read just one of those what
Sure.
you found?
Sure. The way a butterfly count works is you start at the beginning, you mark your time, and you walk at a steady pace, and you look 20 feet to your left, 20 feet to your right, and 20 feet behind you. You don't look behind you, and you just count what you see. So, when I get to the end and I turn around and walk back, I do see more than I saw on my first, but you can't count them. So this is not by any means all the butterflies. And one of the things we kind of ran out of time, but I do have pictures. If anyone wants to see, there's really pretty pictures of the butterflies that I can show you. But
They'll
just
be
on
in
this,
the next journal.
yeah, but just on this one count, there were 2 tiger swallowtails, 10 black swallowtails, 7 cabbage whites, 6 sulfurs, 1 painted lady, 1 question mark, and 23 monarchs.
Yes, of course.
My name is Lynn Schumacher. I know you guys. You've been dealing with the prairie weeds behind my house since all this started. I'm not happy with it. We were never asked. We were never included, whatever, but we get to look at it every day. You guys came out. You worked your butts off to try and fix it back there and make it look halfway decent and at least salvage whatever is going on back there. Still looks terrible, sorry, but it does. We've let our bushes overgrow, we've let everything so we can see as little of it as possible. One of the problems we're having now that's even more frustrating is our yard is so filled with weeds that we can no longer control them. And now we're gonna have to go pay a service to come out and get rid of the weeds. My husband says he's seen weeds out there he's never seen before. It's not just the backyard, it's the front yard. I'm sure you'll have a reason why has nothing to do with the prairie, so I'm not even asking for a reason, but I'm letting you know that we never had anything like this before. So whatever you say, it's because of the weeds, because my neighbors had the same problem. I also want to go back to the coyote thing. Coyotes aren't attacking anybody, you're right, they're not attacking anybody, but they're there. And they come out of nowhere because they're in the tall weeds and you can't see them, and they just come out of nowhere. And don't tell me they're not, because my neighbor has a video, which I'd be happy to post to your website so you could see the coyotes coming up close to her deck. She's in her house taking videos of them. So I guess I want to back it up here. A lot of the residents who are not happy with this, they don't come, whatever. But you need to know that this was thrown at us, and we're not happy about it. And I understand we have to live with it. We have no choice. It was pushed on us. But I don't feel that any Prospect Heights money should be spent on this anymore, because there are a lot of other uses for money for the kids in the community and whatever, other than this weed mess that's back there. We have people that walk their dogs and their dogs go, and it's like a walking path for people walking their dogs now back there. So I listened to all, there's a reason for this, and oh, it's great and wonderful. The monarch butterflies have come back. I see monarch butterflies, so I'll give you that. But it is extremely unattractive. And if you're walking by it and you're just seeing the weeds and, oh, isn't this pretty, that's great. But for the people that have to look at it out their windows every single day and deal with the coyotes that are coming out of the bushes, coming out of the weeds, you can't see them, it's real, it's there. And I know you love your stuff, but I just wanted to come here and see if there was any plan, and it doesn't really sound like there is. There's all these reasons why everything's okay, but there really isn't a plan. And I'm not here to cause trouble. You guys worked so hard to fix it back there, but it's just a mess. So that's all I want to say. I don't want you to think that all the neighborhood is happy, because it isn't. Other people just don't come and say things. But to me, this is important, because at one time I loved being out in my backyard for years. Now I hate it. I hate it. I even hate looking outside. So just wanted to let you know that I know you worked hard, but it's disgusting back there, and it's not as good as everybody makes it sound. We do have butterflies, though, so that's a good thing, I guess.
Thanks for your comment, Lynn. I'd like to just respond to that a little bit. If you want to, I don't care. It's up to you. When you first expressed your dissatisfaction with the the Prairie. We corresponded by email for quite some time, and then finally you agreed to have us come out there. What we offered to you was to take you to any one of several local mature prairies and show you what a mature prairie would look like.
I know what a mature
Right.
prairie looks like,
Okay.
which I told you.
You didn't bite on that either, so then finally, you and your husband agreed to meet us, and we came out to your house, and we stood in your yard, and we looked back through a small opening, and we discussed possible remedies. And so one of the remedies that you seemed to be very, very happy with was to put a tall grass prairie in there. And so we said, we'd love to do that because no one wants a tall grass prairie. You wanted it so that you couldn't see anything but
couldn't
the
see the
tall
rest
grass
of the
prairie.
mountains, right.
All right? So we came out and we did. We spent quite a significant amount of time there. We put in over 1,500 plugs, and these are plugs that are all nurtured from seed. They're grown, they're transplanted, they're brought out, we plug them in, we put them in. They were there, we watered them all summer long, we used your hose, you were kind enough to let us use it.
Like I said,
Right.
you know, I thought instead of going to ComEd and saying, oh my God, look what you did, I thought compromise was the best thing.
Yeah.
And we were happy to do that. And I'm not saying that you guys are bad, evil, terrible. I know you love this. You worked very hard on it, but it's still, so I'm resigned that it's going to stay there. But I felt I had to get up and say that the neighbors are not happy. The people who live along it are not happy. They either put up a fence, some of them I'm sure are, but they either put up a fence, or I know that guy down the street that mowed it all down, or whatever. But we didn't do that. We followed the rules. We did what we were supposed to do. And yet you still go and you put signs, do not mow or whatever. And it's like a slap in the face to us because we've been following the rules and not just wanting to mow it down because it looks so bad. We followed the rules.
But unfortunately, where we planted all of those plants, the very following year, it was mowed down in a big.
Not by us.
So somebody else must have. And so
It
that's
was-
part of the issue is that random, and I don't know who, residents or somebody else keeps sort of coming in and mowing down certain sections that we're working on, and that really just sets us back.
Well,
and
we didn't
creates
do
more
that.
weeds.
I know the guy down the street did, but we didn't do that, so I don't even want that coming
Well,
up.
the
because my
entire
husband-
area behind where we actually did the restoration work, and that was real specific restoration work there. We came out one late summer afternoon and were horrified to find a donut had been cut into the area that we had so
Well, that wasn't us.
hardly planted. This was probably 150 feet long, maybe 40 feet wide, and the setback to that, to the work that had been done, and the possibility of that looking any better, just completely took everything. It went right back to ground zero. We're starting
Well, then,
over again.
I'm very glad that I came up here tonight
Mm-hmm.
because I would feel horrible if you were to think that was us after we knew how hard you worked there. So we didn't do that. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And we're not
but we
accusing
didn't
you
do
of
that.
doing
Okay,
it.
I just want to
No.
make sure that's clear because
it
we
doesn't-
followed the rules.
Yeah. We've had several incidents there. I mean, most recently, someone mowed down another 1,200 square feet of prairie
Okay, but
on
you
Elmer's
can
Road.
understand, people are fed up
But
with it.
the point here is that the land doesn't belong to the people. They have no right to go out and mow down 1,200 feet of prairie. It belongs to Commonwealth Edison. It's being leased by the Park District. We see this all over at all of our sites. People want to extend their yards as far as they can, and they just simply take over public property.
I can't speak to that. I can only speak to our little section, and I know that my husband was very careful not to do anything, and he certainly wouldn't have gone out and cut a donut out there. He wouldn't want to ruin his lawn tractor. So there's no way that we did that. And so if you are thinking that, that makes me feel very bad because I know how hard you worked.
Well, what we would be glad to do, if you would like, we'd be more than happy to come out there and meet with you again and look at the area
No.
and see what else we can do.
I I was upset just coming here tonight. I wanted to come, and I said I wasn't going to say anything because I just wanted to hear what the next step was. And I didn't feel that there was a next step, that it was just, it's still going to be that mess out there. In the wintertime, do you know how horrible that looks? It's just unbelievable. So I know how hard you worked, and I know how passionate you are about what you're doing, and I'm not trying to take that away from you or criticize you for that at all. That is not my intent. But as a resident who has to look at that every day and live on that every day, I think you need to understand where we're coming from. I'm here talking to you. People that are out there just mad and just cutting things down, that's a whole nother story, but that's not us. And we're heartbroken by what's going on out there. So thank you again for
Thank
what
you.
you tried to do.
Again, if you'd
And
like for us to come out
I-
and look again, we'd be glad to do that.
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a few comments just to address what you said. I think, first of all, number one, I think you should know that we really, really, really want to be good neighbors. And we are one, section of town that we're working on. And you're our neighbors to this prairie. And just like I have a next-door neighbor to me on one side, and a next-door neighbor to me on the other side, and a next-door neighbor across the street, and we all try to get along, we really do want to get along with you. We really want to figure out what works. But just to give you an example, one person here today said that the prairie was too tall because she's short and she feels a little intimidated walking in something where she can't be seen. Other people have said to us they want it to be tall because they want it to block. So as you can imagine, we want to accommodate people, we want to be friendly with people, we want to be good neighbors. Just to give you an idea, another person said that in order for there to be more visibility at the bike trail, they wanted it to be lower, so we actually did cut a little section, a corner of the prairie to make it lower. So there's sections which are lower, there's sections that are somewhat higher, there's some sections that are higher still, all as an effort to try to accommodate different wants and different needs of the citizens. Admittedly, it's not perfect for anyone. In the town of Prospect Heights, there are people who live next to parking lots, there are people who live next to ball fields, there are people who live next to prairies, and each person might have a like or dislike of the different things. And it's not going to be perfect for everyone, but we're trying to be good neighbors and trying to get input and hear what works and hear what doesn't work. But please be aware that it's not going to be perfect for every person all the time.
I get that. And I think what would have really helped in the very beginning, if you would have included the residents in letting us know what you were doing and getting our input before this mess got started. And I'm done. You can't say any more that will make me feel any different. Yes, we all need to work together, but you needed to be good neighbors with us, and you started it without even, it's like my neighbor next door, he's got chickens and he put up a fence. Okay, you know what he did? He came over and talked to us first before he put the fence up, and he let us know, I'd really like if your tree that's hanging over my yard, if I could cut that off so, it won't affect my chickens and whatever. We were like, yeah, that's how neighbors work together. Not, oh, here it is, we did this, now you're stuck with it. Now we'll try and accommodate what everyone's needs are.
And Lynn, that's a very valid criticism, and it was definitely one of the mistakes that we made, not realizing the importance of early communication and engagement, and in that we've learned from. And so if it's any consolation moving forward, we have taken that in and don't expect to be doing that again. But again, the emphasis here is we still want to try and make this as good and palatable for you. And so if you change your mind, just let us know, because we would still want to work with you.
It's so upsetting. It's just so upsetting. My husband didn't even come tonight. It's just so upsetting. So I think I would be more upset trying to fix it than just go, you know what, whatever, this is what I'm stuck with, and nobody cares. So,
And from their perspective, because I purposely walked along your property thing, from the bike path, I don't mind the tallness, but the pathways that are cut in, that's where I have an issue, where I won't go in it without my mace, and even then, it's like because of the coyote issues.
Yeah.
But when you walk along from Sherwood east to 83, there is a 10 to 15 foot hideous, weedy thing that used to be prairie, whatever, whether it was accidentally mowed, purposely mowed, it does look terrible. From the bike path, everything looks
Yeah.
pretty decent.
Yeah. It's like that side.
But from
yeah.
that property owner's perspective, it does not look attractive when you are on Wildwood and then you're looking south towards the prairie. It is not attractive whatsoever.
So that's what I thought we were gonna get tonight, was some type of a plan or a fix, but it doesn't sound anyway, so.
Well,
thank you.
the plan is to continue the maintenance. I mean, if you look at the far west end, everything that's down there is more biodiverse and it's shorter. You know, there's reasons for all that. You know, as we take out things that have become aggressive, we'll put in other things, and you'll start to see a change. But this is not like your garden where you go pull out something and put something else in. It takes a while. And, you know, all of those things are on our radar. All those things are things that we think about, and it just simply takes time. But once it's done, it's incredible. And so that's the plan. Anything else? John, Chris, any closing comments? Okay. Yes.
I'm Joanna Precisionuk. I'm the city clerk. Lived in Prospect Heights, I think someone asked me, it was 23 years now. And first of all, I want to thank everyone here. Everyone works really hard. Thank you. I love nature. I know there's some scary things about nature, things that make us maybe feel vulnerable. Maybe there's some of us that don't go to forest preserves for whatever reasons. But when you're talking about height, that's what comes to my mind. It's trees. It's something tall around you. That's what you would expect in a forest preserve. So I don't know if there's any solution about that. Plants are plants. That said, one of the beauties that we have living here in Prospect Heights is that we have huge lots. To me, that's like a prairie when I look out my kitchen window. And I don't have the prairie plants. I have grass all the way to the end and really tall bushes in the back. And coyotes still come. They're there in the morning. My dog sees them first. I know when he's barking, it's out there. So it has, I don't think it has anything to do with a prairie. It's just nature. They're going to be there. My biggest concern is we have so many skunks. What do we do about that? It doesn't look like they prey on them. But every time the temperature goes down and it's evening, they're out there. When it's hot and muggy, they're not out there. As soon as it's nice, they're out there too. So maybe that's something we should be asking about, how we get rid of them. But coyotes, by the way, I was just reading, I Googled it as everyone was talking here, that they eat the rodents. That's one of their prey, the grass and other things. They like vegetation and animals, but if there's a question about rodents, that's one of the things that they do attack, so that's a good thing. Solution about coyotes, it's like this gentleman said, they're everywhere. I don't think they have any preference about where they want to be. So I don't think that that's a problem that we've created, or we've embraced having a prairie. And I don't know what that looks like in the back of your yard there. It looks messy, but I guess maybe I'm a little more used to nature messy. Maybe everyone has a different look to that, but if grass is something like the tall grass, if we can, put that back in, it is very decorative. But one other thing to keep in mind, we had a huge deep freeze last year, and I've had pretty English type of gardening in the back of my house, and most of it is destroyed, and it's because of that deep freeze. So we're going to contend with, no matter how hard we work and how much money we spend, that sometimes nature just fights with us. So there's going to be a lot of restoration in that regard. So yeah, human destroying, mowing, that doesn't help. And maybe if we put up signs that we're trying really hard, right, to put those grasses in. It is very decorative once it does work. So hopefully we can bring that back and make everyone happy again. All right. So
Thank
I just
you.
wanted to share that, so.
Thank you, appreciate it.
welcome.
If anyone else has anything else, I think it's time to close the meeting. We have our board meeting coming up, so thank you all for coming.
Well, you're welcome to stay for the board meeting.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay, and we also, on Sunday morning at 9 to 12, we have a work day, so if you'd like to come out and volunteer, we'd love to have you. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.